My name is Brenna Caldwell. I never thought I would be the kind of woman who follows her husband to another city just to see if he is lying. But that weekend changed everything. My husband, Talon Mercer, told me he was going to Las Vegas with the guys. He said it was just a short trip to relax, drink a little, and play cards. He kissed my forehead before leaving and told me not to wait up on Sunday night because his flight might be late. He sounded casual, almost too casual. At first, I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest. But that feeling had been growing for months. Talon had started acting different. He kept his phone face down. He smiled at messages he wouldn't explain. He became protective of small things, like his work bag and his laptop. The night before his trip, I was putting away laundry when I opened his briefcase to place his cufflinks inside. That's when I saw a folded paper tucked under some documents. It wasn't the hotel he mentioned earlier. It was a reservation confirmation for a luxury suite at a high-end resort on the Strip. The room was booked for 2 guests. 2 guests. My hands started shaking. I checked the dates again.
Same weekend.
Same city. But not the place he told me about. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe slowly. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe one of his friends booked it. Maybe I was overthinking. But deep inside, I knew something was wrong. Instead of confronting him, I stayed calm. I didn't want excuses. I didn't want half-truths. I wanted to see the truth myself. So after he left for the airport, I booked my own ticket to Las Vegas. I used my savings. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend. On his second night there, I walked into the casino of that luxury resort. The lights were bright, and the sound of chips clicking filled the room. My heart was pounding so loudly, I thought someone might hear it. Then I saw him. Talon was sitting at a blackjack table, laughing in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. He looked relaxed.
Happy. Free.
And next to him was a woman. She had long dark hair and wore a red dress that stood out in the crowd. Her hand rested lightly on his thigh under the table. His fingers brushed her wrist between bets like it was the most natural thing in the world. I stood behind him for a moment, watching the man I trusted act like I didn't exist. That was the moment I realized something important. I wasn't there to beg. I wasn't there to cry. I was there to see the truth with my own eyes. And now that I had seen it, everything inside me shifted. I did not step forward right away. I stood there long enough to understand what I was looking at. The woman beside Talon was not nervous or unsure. She looked comfortable, like she belonged there with him. I walked closer and heard her laugh at something he said. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was warm and personal, the kind of laugh I used to give him. For a second, I felt something break inside me, but I kept my face calm. I moved around the table until I was directly behind him. He was focused on his cards. The dealer was waiting for his decision. That's when I spoke. So, are we hitting on 16 tonight? My voice was steady.
Clear.
Not loud, but loud enough.
Talon frotse.
He turned slowly, and when his eyes met mine, all the color drained from his face. It was like he had seen something impossible, like I wasn't supposed to exist in that moment. The woman looked between us, confused. Do you two know each other? She asked. I gave her a small, polite smile. I'm his wife. Silence. The dealer looked uncomfortable. A couple of men at the table shifted in their seats. Talon opened his mouth, but no words came out. The woman pulled her hand away from his leg like she had touched fire. Wife, she repeated softly. I nodded. 9 years. She stared at him. You told me you were separated. Separated. That word hit harder than I expected. He didn't even say unhappy. He didn't say struggling. He said separated. Talon finally found his voice. Brenna, this isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed. It looked exactly like what it was. I reached into my purse and pulled out the printed hotel confirmation. Then I placed it gently on the table in front of him. The luxury suite. 2 guests. I think it looks very clear, I said quietly. The woman's face changed. The confidence disappeared. She wasn't angry at me. She looked betrayed too. You said you were living alone, she whispered to him. Talon stood up quickly and tried to guide me away from the table. We should talk upstairs. I stepped back from his hand. There's nothing private left to say, I answered. I looked at the woman again. Did you know about me at all? She shook her head. He told me the divorce papers were almost done. Divorce papers. I felt the last piece of hope inside me disappear. He hadn't just lied about the trip. He had built another story with someone else. A full story. The cards were still on the table. The dealer cleared his throat, unsure what to do. I looked at Talon one more time. Enjoy your weekend, I said softly. But inside, I was already planning what would happen next. Outline 3. I did not cry in that casino. I did not scream. I walked away with my back straight and my head high. But once I reached the elevator, my hands started trembling. Not because I was weak, but because everything I believed about my marriage had just collapsed in front of strangers. Inside the quiet of my hotel room, I finally let myself think clearly. Talon hadn't just lied about a trip. He had created an entirely different version of his life. He told another woman that we were separating, that divorce papers were almost done, that he was living alone. That means this was not a mistake. It was planned. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. Before coming to Vegas, I had already met with a lawyer back home. I hadn't told anyone, not even Talon. I needed to understand my rights before making any emotional decisions. Now I was grateful I did. Earlier that week, I had quietly gathered financial records, bank statements, credit card charges, transfers from our joint account. There were thousands of dollars spent over the past 8 months on things that had nothing to do with our home: expensive dinners, gifts, hotel stays in nearby cities. This wasn't new.
It was ongoing.
And he used money we both worked for. That hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. The next morning, I called my lawyer from my hotel room. My voice was calm. I explained what I had seen. I told her about the woman, about the lies, about the joint funds used for the trip. She didn't sound surprised. She told me we could file immediately for legal separation based on financial misconduct and deception. She also advised me to freeze the joint account before more money disappeared.
So I did.
By noon, the account was locked. By evening, the paperwork was started. I didn't contact Talon. I didn't respond to the missed calls that began coming in. I watched his name flash across my phone again and again. He left messages saying it was complicated, that he panicked, that he never meant to hurt me. But 8 months is not panic. It is choice. I flew home the next day, without telling him. I wanted to be in our house before he returned. Not to argue, not to fight, to prepare. When I walked through the front door, the house felt different. Quieter, colder. But for the first time in a long while, I felt clear. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. When I got home, I didn't waste time sitting in memories. I moved with purpose. The first thing I did was call a locksmith. By the afternoon, the locks on every door were changed. I kept one key for myself and placed the spare inside my desk drawer. It felt strange doing that to my own husband, but I reminded myself he stopped acting like a husband a long time ago. Next, I walked through the house slowly, room by room. I wasn't looking for emotional comfort. I was taking inventory. In our bedroom, half of the closet was filled with his suits and expensive jackets. I pulled out 3 large storage boxes from the garage and began folding his clothes neatly. Not angrily, not carelessly, just efficiently. Each shirt I folded reminded me of events we attended together. Weddings, work dinners, holidays. But instead of breaking down, I focused on something else, the strength it took for me to stay calm. By evening, most of his belongings were boxed. Shoes lined up, watches placed in small cases, personal documents sealed in envelopes. I wasn't throwing anything away. I wasn't destroying anything. I was simply removing him from my space. Later that night, Talon's calls continued. I finally answered one. "Brenna, please," he said quickly. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to explain," I replied. My voice surprised even me. It sounded steady,
Detached.
"It wasn't serious," he insisted. "It just happened, It lasted 8 months, I said quietly. That's not something that just happens. There was silence on the line. I was unhappy, he finally admitted. I closed my eyes for a second. You had a voice. You could have spoken to me. Instead, you lied. He tried to shift blame gently. Said we'd been distant. Said I was focused on work. Said he felt ignored. But I knew the truth. We both worked hard. We both faced stress. The difference was I stayed loyal. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I told him. He went completely quiet. What? He whispered. I froze the joint account. The paperwork has started. His breathing changed. The calm confidence he once carried was gone. You're overreacting, he said. But it sounded more like fear than anger.
No, iyan suarat sufli.
I'm finally reacting correctly. When I hung up, I didn't feel revenge. I felt control returning to my life. Outside, the sun was setting behind the houses on our street. The sky looked peaceful. Inside, my marriage was ending. But for the first time since Vegas, I didn't feel powerless. Talon came home 2 days later. He didn't warn me what time he would arrive. I heard his car pull into the driveway just after sunset. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a folder of documents in front of me, a cup of tea untouched. When he tried the front door, it didn't open. A few seconds later, my phone rang. Why isn't my key working? He asked, frustration already rising in his voice. Because I changed the locks, I said calmly. There was a long pause. Then, you're serious about this? Yes. I walked to the door, but didn't open it right away. Through the glass, I could see him standing there with his suitcase, looking smaller than I remembered. Not powerful, not confident, just nervous. When I finally opened the door, I didn't step aside to let him in. His eyes searched my face. Brenna, please. Let's talk inside. You can talk from there. His shoulders dropped. I made a mistake. No. I corrected him gently. You made hundreds of choices. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to look regretful. It didn't mean anything. I thought about the hotel suite. The hand on his thigh. The words separated. It meant enough for you to lie every day for 8 months, I said. He looked down. For the first time, I saw something close to shame. I was going to end it, he muttered.
But you didn't, I replied.
I stepped back slightly and pointed toward the garage. Your things are boxed. His head snapped up. You packed my stuff? Yes. He walked past me toward the garage. I followed at a distance. When he saw the stacked boxes, his clothes, shoes, watches, everything neatly organized, he looked stunned. You're throwing me out? He asked. I'm protecting myself. I handed him the folder from the kitchen table. These are copies of the separation papers. My lawyer will contact yours. His hands shook as he flipped through the pages. You talked to a lawyer before Vegas? I needed clarity. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't.
For years, I was the patient wife.
The supportive partner. The woman who believed in fixing things quietly. But that version of me ended in a casino under bright lights. You're really ending this, he said softly. I looked at him for a long moment. The man I loved was still standing there. But the trust was gone. And without trust, there was nothing left to rebuild. Yes, I answered. And for the first time, I felt stronger than the betrayal. Outline 6 Talon didn't argue after that. Not loudly, at least. He carried his boxes out one by one, placing them into his car like someone packing up a temporary life. Before he closed the trunk, he turned back toward me. Where am I supposed to go? That question almost made me laugh. For 8 months, he had somewhere else to go. Now he was asking me. That's not my responsibility anymore, I said. He searched my face for softness, for hesitation. I gave him neither. After he drove away, the house felt silent in a different way. Not tense, not heavy, just empty. I walked through each room again, noticing how much space there was without his things scattered around. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It was her. Maricela. My heart skipped, but I opened it. I didn't know, the message read. I swear I didn't know he was still married. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. I believe you. A few seconds later, she called. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice sounded small. He told me you two were living separate lives. That you were only staying together because of finances. I closed my eyes. We were not separated. We shared the same bed. She was quiet. Then she said something unexpected. He said you didn't care about him anymore. That stung. Not because it was true, but because he needed to paint me as cold to justify his actions. I cared enough to stay loyal, I replied. She let out a slow breath. I ended it. I wasn't surprised. Men who lie once will lie again. And once trust is broken on both sides, there is no fantasy left. Take care of yourself, I told her. You too, she whispered. When the call ended, I felt something strange. Not anger. Not jealousy. Relief. There was no competition between us. We were both deceived by the same man, just in different ways. The next morning, Talon tried calling again. I let it ring. By afternoon, he left a voicemail. His voice sounded tired. She won't answer me, he said. You've destroyed everything. I sat there listening to his words. Destroyed everything.
No.
He did that the moment he decided his vows were optional. I didn't respond. For the first time in months, I slept deeply that night. A few days later, reality started catching up with Talon. He showed up at the house again, this time without anger.
He looked exhausted.
His clothes were wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. I need to talk, he said quietly when I opened the door. I stayed on the porch. I didn't invite him inside. What is it? I asked. He swallowed. Your father called me into his office. That got my attention. My father, Corbin Caldwell, was not just my parent. He was also Talon's employer. Talon worked as an executive at my father's logistics firm. My father had trusted him for years. And, I said. He knows, Talon replied. I felt a slow breath leave my chest. I hadn't gone to my father crying or asking for revenge. I simply told him the truth when he asked why Talon had taken sudden time off and why legal documents had been sent to the house. My father valued loyalty above everything. Not just in marriage, in business. He asked me if I used company travel perks for personal trips, Talon continued. If I used business funds to upgrade hotel rooms. I looked at him carefully. Did you? He didn't answer directly. That was answer enough. The board reviewed my expense reports, he said. They're suspending me pending investigation. Suspending? That meant his income would stop. His title would be frozen. His reputation questioned. You told him? Talon asked. I told him the truth, I replied. What he did with that information was his decision. He ran his hands over his face. You're ruining my career. No, I said softly. Your choices are. There was a long silence between us. The man standing in front of me looked nothing like the confident husband who once promised me security and honesty. I never thought you'd go this far, he said. I looked at him steadily. You never thought I'd protect myself. That was the difference. For years, I had been patient, understanding, forgiving of small mistakes. But betrayal changes something deep inside a person. It teaches you where your limits truly are. I didn't do this to hurt you, I added. I did this because I deserve better. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Because deep down, he knew I was right. Within 2 weeks, everything around Talon began to fall apart. The investigation at my father's company moved quickly. Expense reports were reviewed carefully. Travel records were checked. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. Company benefits had been used to upgrade flights. Corporate discounts were applied to hotel stays that had nothing to do with work. He wasn't just unfaithful in our marriage. He had been careless in his career too. The board made their decision. His executive contract was terminated. When he called to tell me, his voice sounded hollow. They let me go, he said. After everything I gave that company. I held the phone away from my ear for a second before responding. You didn't just give. You took. He was quiet. I didn't think it would matter, he added softly. That sentence explained everything. He didn't think the lies would matter. He didn't think the small dishonest choices would add up. He didn't think I would walk away. But they did. After losing his job, he moved into a small rental across town. I heard this not from him, but from mutual acquaintances who felt awkward around me. Some of them tried to hint that maybe I should forgive him, that everyone makes mistakes. But 8 months is not a mistake. It is a pattern. Meanwhile, the house felt lighter each day. I rearranged the living room furniture. I painted the bedroom walls a soft gray instead of the dark blue he liked. I removed the framed photos from the hallway and replaced them with empty space. Not because I wanted to erase my past, but because I wanted room for something new. One evening, Talon showed up unexpectedly again. This time, he looked desperate. "I've lost everything," he said.
My job. My relationship.
"My home." I stood at the doorway, steady and calm. "You didn't lose everything," I replied. "You traded it." He blinked at me, confused. "You traded stability for excitement, loyalty for ego, honesty for convenience." His shoulders dropped as if the weight of those words pressed down on him. "I never thought you'd be this cold," he whispered. I shook my head gently. "I'm not cold. I'm clear." And clarity can feel harsh to someone who expected forgiveness without consequence. The mediation process began a month later. We sat across from each other in a quiet office, a long wooden table between us. There were no raised voices.
No dramatic scenes.
Just paperwork and truth laid out clearly. Talon looked thinner.
Tired.
He avoided my eyes at first. The mediator reviewed our assets, the house, the savings, retirement accounts, investments. Everything we built over 9 years was now being divided on paper. When the topic of finances came up, my lawyer presented the records. The transfers from our joint account, the hotel charges, the gifts, the travel expenses. Talon didn't deny them. "I wasn't thinking clearly," he said. "I felt invisible at home." Invisible. That word again. I finally looked at him directly. "You are not invisible. You are trusted. There is a difference." I reminded him of the nights I stayed up helping him prepare presentations, the times I supported him when projects failed, the months I handled most of the bills when his department struggled. "You weren't alone," I said calmly. "You just stopped appreciating what you had."
He didn't argue.
The mediator asked if reconciliation was possible. Talon looked at me with something close to regret. "Brenna," he said softly, "if I could take it back, I would. But trust doesn't return because someone regrets losing comfort. It returns when honesty never leaves." "I can't rebuild with someone who rewrote our life without telling me," I replied. In the end, the division was straightforward. Because of his financial misconduct and the misuse of shared funds, I retained the house and a larger portion of the savings. It wasn't revenge. It was fairness. When we signed the documents, the sound of the pen against paper felt louder than it should have. That was the official end. As we stood to leave, Talon hesitated. "I never thought this would be our story," he said.
Neither did I.
But stories change when someone decides vows are flexible. I walked out of that office without looking back. For the first time in months, my steps felt steady. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my life looked completely different. Not louder. Not dramatic. Just peaceful. The house no longer felt like a shared space filled with tension. It felt like mine. I planted flowers in the front yard that Talon once said were too bright. I replaced the heavy curtains with lighter ones that let the sun in every morning. Small changes. But they mattered. People often think revenge has to be loud, that it means shouting, exposing secrets, or making someone suffer publicly. But the real revenge was this. I rebuilt. Talon tried reaching out a few times in the beginning. Short messages. Apologies. Once he asked if we could meet for coffee just to talk. I declined. Not because I hated him, but because I finally understood something important. Love without respect is unstable. Forgiveness without change is dangerous. And loyalty should never be one-sided. I heard through mutual friends that his career never fully recovered. His reputation followed him. Maricela had completely cut contact. The excitement he chased disappeared quickly when reality stepped in. One evening, months later, I ran into him at a grocery store across town. It was accidental. He looked surprised to see me. He seemed older somehow, less confident. "Hi, Brenna," he said carefully.
Hello. Dalon.
There was no anger in my voice, no shaking hands, no racing heart, just calm. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he nodded and stepped aside to let me pass. That simple gesture said everything. The power dynamic had shifted. I walked toward the checkout line without looking back. As I loaded groceries into my car, I realized something. The woman who stood behind him at that blackjack table felt betrayed and hurt. But the woman standing here now felt stronger than ever. He gambled with our marriage, thinking he could manage two lives at once. But in the end, he lost both. And I didn't need to flip the table to win. I simply chose myself.